It's pretty incredible that in 2025, woman newsreaders saying the word women would be seen as a refreshing and even radical thing. That should just be a non-story. Yet in 2025, it is a story precisely because of the sort of vernacular nonsense that we've been seeing in recent years, to put it one way. So I'm talking about Martine Croxall of the BBC. She's got credit across the board, including from myself, for using plain language to describe something. This was in the context of reading out a report related to the heat that we're having. Um, this was research conducted by the London School of Health and Tropical Medicine. It's estimating that up to 600 people could die in the heat wave. But as part of that report, she read out the following. Malcolm Mystery, who was involved in the research, said that aged, pregnant people, women, and those with pre-existing health conditions should exercise caution. Now, the significant point about that line was when she said the word women, that was something that she put in there that was not on the teleprompter. That one word, women, a single noun that just brings about a viral response. And I'm pleased to say the response has been overwhelmingly positive. Um, she got a lot of support on her social media, um, including from J.K. Rowling, um, and others. And people were commending her for doing this, and some were asking would her job be on the line. The good news is there appears to have been no sort of reprimand from her bosses. In fact, the BBC has stood by her. So that gets into another question which hasn't really been answered. Um, on the teleprompter, who put in that thing, pregnant people? Was this actually the words of Professor Mystery himself? Um, assuming that he's a man, and if so, is he, pandering to a certain narrative, or is it someone in the BBC who's put that into the teleprompter and said, "Well, we better be inclusive and make it pregnant people rather than saying women." This, of course, comes on top of hospitals talking about expectant people and people with cervixes and other medical paraphernalia containing that those sort of euphemisms. It's absolute nonsense. Absolute nonsense. Um, Incidentally, in a not totally unrelated subject, actor Stephen Fry has come out and attacked J.K. Rowling and claimed that she's been radicalized by vitriol. I mean, this is just ridiculous. I think that the animosity level towards J.K. Rowling is ridiculous. Now, she's not perfect. I'm not going to say that she's never said anything that's, maybe should provoke debate, or she is a multimillionaire, but this is a woman who um, genuinely deserves some admiration. She went from being a single mother on job seekers allowance to being not just a millionaire. I don't know what her exact net worth is, but I believe she's surpassed the billionaire mark now. Commercially, one of the most successful authors of all time. That is inspiring. She's created a, I wouldn't call myself a mega Harry Potter fan, but I appreciate the creativity of it. I think it's a British cultural institution, and that is entirely from J.K. Rowling. Now, the situation there is that when you get an actor, Tom Felton, refusing to jump on the bandwagon to attack J.K. Rowling, he then finds himself targeted. It's insane. It really is ridiculous. It's kind of ironic, actually, that so-called villains in the Harry Potter series, at least the actors who played them, Tom Felton, Ralph Fiennes, um, Helena Bonham Carter, they're the people who are defending J.K. Rowling. Yet the three main protagonists, Daniel Radcliffe, Emma Watson, and Rupert Grint, have jumped on the bandwagon. Um, it's ludicrous. Now, I actually don't really agree that because they got the big breakthrough through the Harry Potter films that they shouldn't be allowed an opinion. I think they could disagree with J.K. Rowling. I don't really agree that they can't disagree with her. But what I do find unfortunate is the fact that they've jumped on the bandwagon to to basically smear her as a transphobe. They may not have directly said that, but they are joining in that narrative. But what is transphobia? Is it saying that biology is a thing? I personally don't think a man can be a woman. I just don't. So, by the definition of the trans lobby, I would be a transphobe. And yet, I can also say I have genuine sympathy with people who suffer gender dysphoria. I have known a few trans people in my life, not closely, granted, but I've known them and I haven't been in their shoes. I haven't been through the anxiety and the fear that they may have been through. Um, I do think that it can be very difficult being a trans person. I think there is a lot of negative publicity out there, although I would point out that it isn't helped by the aggressive bullying tactics of some militant protesters. You know, when you have people literally holding up signs calling for so-called turf women to be hanged, it isn't exactly good PR. I recently got threatened by, I don't know what the person was, if they were trans themselves or just a so-called ally, but he was spewing out vitriol. I was saying he, based on, you know, he had a masculine name. I don't know what, but this that's beside the point. Actually, the point is, if you're conducting yourself in that sort of vitriolic way, people are going to have a certain perception, and I appreciate that it's personal for them in a way that it isn't personal for me, but you know, it isn't exactly going to make the public sympathetic. Um, So I do have some sympathy in the sense that if you're a trans person, the coverage there is an enormous amount of ridicule out there. You know, that can, I'm sure, be difficult sometimes, and I do think trans people probably do experience a lot of loneliness and depression. But I don't think it's accurate to say that's because women are saying that womanhood matters. Um, You know, this can be a complex subject. I don't think that biology is complex. I don't think that saying a man cannot be a woman is that should be common sense. Someone made the analogy, you know, if you have a desert island and let's say there's um 50 women and 50 biological men who want to be women, 100 years later, if 100 skeletons were found, you would have 50 female skeletons and 50 male skeletons. The point being that um, mental health and biology are not the same thing. I just think that there's been aspects of this debate that have been overlooked. For example, detransitioners. You know, we hear about so-called conversion therapy, but why is there so little sympathy given to detransitioners, people who have had an operation and then regretted it? Why are they not given support by the trans lobby? Now, if it is really about people finding themselves and be comfortable with themselves, shouldn't they be given as much respect and sympathy? I hear cases of teenage girls who've had mastectomies and then they get to the mid-20s and they regret it. It's tragic, actually. I think there may be unscrupulous medical professionals out there who are pandering to this. But you know, we're at a point where if you have the sort of views that I have on this, you're going to be smeared as a transphobe no matter what you say. I mean, I don't actually believe in mocking trans people. I think some of the debate has been a bit cruel, perhaps. You know, I don't believe that if someone's struggling with gender identity, I don't believe in just mocking them. But I do think that sometimes the narrative invites ridicule. Like pregnant people, no, that is nonsense. And I would say this too. I think that there are trans people out there who are well aware that the narrative hasn't helped the movement. I mean, I don't particularly like Caitlyn Jenner's politics in some areas. You know, I'll use the term they in this context, have been supportive of Donald Trump, and you know, in many ways they're a right wing Republican, but at least he has understood, they have understood that certain phrases are just absolute nonsense, abject nonsense. So I think that trans people who do think outside the box and say, look, I've had this journey and I identify as a trans woman, but I respect that it isn't the same as being a biological woman. I think they should be given it more of a voice. You know, it's like any social movement. Why is it that the loudest, most aggressive of the trans lobby seem to be the ones that get all the headlines? They don't deserve it. You know, some of them are, as far as I'm concerned, misogynistic thugs. Um, so, in terms of, I mean, when we talk about hate and vitriol, that can be thrown around a lot. I would say if someone is spewing up, threats against trans people, and dehumanizing them, then yeah, that could be seen as vitriolic and hateful. And there are hate crimes happen against trans people, sometimes horrific violence. I heard of a case in Brazil some years ago where a trans woman was set on fire. Now that's absolutely appalling. No human being should have to go through that. Um, but J.K. Rowling saying, speaking up for women who defend womanhood, how that could be perceived as hate, I don't know. I mean, if someone says that a man cannot be a woman, is that hating trans women? I don't think so. It's just saying, no, they cannot be a woman in the same sense as a biological woman. But it's not saying I want any harm against that person. It's not saying that that person personally hurt me. I mean, as a man, they don't hurt me. But I do feel sympathy to women who have to put up with misogynistic abuse from the trans lobby. So that's my take on it, basically. And I do think there's a dangerous trajectory of language policing around this. Um, so if the BBC is going in a direction of more plain talking, that is a very good thing. If the state broadcaster is going down that line, we're also seeing, and maybe this is for another video, but we are now seeing less companies are feeling an absolute necessity to wave the pride flag just to prove something. That's a good thing. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, the only prerequisite for a company should be that they don't discriminate. That is to say, they allow LGBT employees, you know, that should be enough. But this thing about, when we have Pride Month, this idea that companies have to show the flag, otherwise they're not being inclusive is ridiculous. And when you hear cases of police spending money on putting the pride colours on police cars, that is a waste of police money. It really is. The Navy recently done it with a decommissioned um, submarine that had been used. No, excuse me, it wasn't a submarine. I think it was a landing vessel that had been used in the Falklands. Now it was decommissioned, but that's still money that could be better spent at a time when this country's defences are very important. So I think there's a legitimate debate to be had, and it's difficult to have a debate when you have someone just screaming, "It's vitriol, it's hate." Again, I'm not in their shoes. Maybe I would feel defensive and anxious if I was. So I will caveat this by saying anyone out there who thinks that the right approach is just to mock someone struggling with gender dysphoria, that's uncalled for and it can be quite cruel. I don't support that. Um, I don't support personally vilifying a trans person. You know, that's also cruel and unnecessary. But Martine Croxall was right to correct that teleprompter. And okay, the bosses are defending her, but the obvious follow-up question is why was it there in the first place? So hopefully this marks a trajectory with the BBC that we're going to see more common sense. Um, I mean, you get there was a company that was connected with Comic Relief, or I think it actually was Children in Need, but you, Anti-Racism Cumbria was the group, and they were actually trying to tap in, turf language, as they would call it, turf language, that is women who believe in biology, white supremacy. It's this insane far left intersectionality, like trying to link one thing to another. So, in other words, a woman who says that biology matters is somehow akin to a white supremacist. This is insane. Absolutely insane. Anyway, I'll leave it there. But Martin Croxall. I mean, actually, what she done wasn't particularly radical. In normal circumstances, it shouldn't be a cause of praise. But we're in a situation where it is, because you have a newsreader correcting. She's a woman newsreader correcting what should be obvious. Um, so I think the follow-up question is, why was it in the teleprompter in the first place? And the only reason one can think of is so as to be ostensibly inclusive and not offend trans people. Now, any trans people watching this, if you agree with me and you say, look, we're not offended, it wasn't necessary to change that, then I say, I want to, I think you people should have a voice. Because this is the thing. I think there will be trans people who are tired of the language police always speaking for them. Maybe they've had their own journey. They feel that they had to have a sex change operation, but they are not necessarily hung up on constant language policing. So those people perhaps need more of a voice and better representation, rather than having militant trans activists, misogynistic thugs, always controlling the narrative. I'll leave it there. But well done, Martine Croxall.